Nadia Osei was not the kind of woman who made noise when she entered a room. She was 31 years old, softly spoken, and steady in a way that most people mistook for simplicity. She wore her hair in a low bun most days, carried a worn leather notebook everywhere she went, and had a habit of listening to people far longer than they deserved. She was the kind of woman who remembered how you took your coffee, who sent a message on your hard days without being asked, and who stayed up through the night when someone she loved needed her near. For 6 years, that someone was Marcus Drayton. Marcus was 36, broad-shouldered, and spoke with the kind of calm authority that made people stop talking when he entered a room. He had built a small business consulting firm almost entirely by his own will, or so the story went. His colleagues called him sharp. His investors called him reliable. His friends called him the kind of man you wanted in your corner. In every circle he moved in, people used the word leader when they talked about him, and he had never once corrected them or thought too hard about what that word really meant. Nadia had loved him from the beginning, without calculation. She had loved him through the early years when the business was struggling and he came home too tired to speak. She had sat beside him at his kitchen table at midnight, reading through investor decks, asking the right questions, pointing to the weak arguments before any outsider could find them. She had coached him before phone calls with difficult clients. She had organized his thinking when everything was messy and his confidence was low. She had held his hand at funerals for people he barely knew, because she understood that being present was sometimes the only language that mattered. What she never did was ask for credit, not because she was a doormat, but because she loved him, and love, the real kind, does not keep a ledger. The trouble was that Marcus had mistaken her silence for agreement, her consistency for permanence, her love for a given, like electricity or air, something you use without thinking because you trust it will always be there. It happened on a Tuesday in November. Marcus had invited a group of colleagues and their partners to dinner at a restaurant near the city center. The table was full, the wine was expensive, and the conversation was light and confident in the way conversations are when everyone present has decided to perform their best version of themselves. Midway through the evening, one of the men at the table, a business acquaintance named Robert, raised his glass in Marcus's direction and said, with genuine admiration, "Marcus, I have to say, building a firm like yours entirely on your own, that takes something most people simply do not have." The table looked at Marcus. He smiled. He raised his own glass. "Thank you," he said. "I've just always known what I wanted." Nadia was sitting directly across the table from him. She heard every word. She watched him smile. She watched him accept, without hesitation, praise, built on a story that erased her entirely, and she did not say a word. She picked up her glass, brought it to her lips, and swallowed slowly. She did not cry at the restaurant. She did not argue on the way home. She sat quietly in the passenger seat while Marcus talked about how well the evening had gone, and she looked out the window at the passing streetlights and felt something shift inside her. Not dramatically, not loudly, but in the deep, settled way that a door shifts when it finally closes after years of being left ajar. She stayed awake that night, long after Marcus had fallen asleep. She sat at the kitchen table with her notebook open in front of her, and she wrote for 3 hours. Not with anger, with honesty. She wrote down every moment she had given herself to his life, every quiet sacrifice, every morning she had pushed her own plans aside, every time she had shrunk herself so that there was more room for him to be large. When the sun came up through the kitchen window, she closed the notebook. She made a decision. And this time, she did not ask anyone's opinion about it. By the time Marcus woke up and came downstairs for breakfast, Nadia was gone. Not in a dramatic way. The apartment was clean. There were no broken things, no slammed doors, no evidence of a storm. Just a folded blanket on the sofa where she used to sit in the evenings, and a single note on the kitchen counter in her handwriting. It said, "I hope the version of yourself you performed last night makes you happy. I'm going to go find out if I can." Marcus read it twice. Then he stood in the kitchen for a long time, holding the piece of paper, telling himself she would call by afternoon. She did not call. She had moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city, a one-bedroom place with large windows and not much furniture. She bought a new kettle, a few plants, and a bookshelf she assembled herself on the floor of the living room on her first evening there. She ate dinner slowly that night, alone, and noticed that her shoulders had dropped about 2 inches from where they usually sat. She did not post anything on social media. She did not call mutual friends. She did not make a scene. She simply stepped out of his orbit, quietly, completely, and the absence of her presence began pulling things apart in ways he had not anticipated. By the end of the first week, Marcus had called her 11 times. She did not answer. He told himself he was worried, that she was being unreasonable, that this was an overreaction to one dinner. He said these things out loud to himself in the apartment that now felt oddly large, and the words did not settle the way he wanted them to. By the end of the second week, his business partner James pulled him aside after a meeting and asked who had been managing the vendor communication. Marcus said he had. James looked at him carefully and said nothing else. By the end of the first month, 3 things had happened that Marcus could not explain away. He had missed a follow-up with a major client because he had not remembered to put it in his calendar, something Nadia had quietly managed for years. He had stood in a boardroom and fumbled through a pitch that normally flowed easily, and afterward realized that what he had lost was not just her help, but the specific way she had always helped him find the story inside the numbers. And he had received a call from an old investor contact who mentioned, gently, that someone named Nadia had been the one to send the quarterly reports that kept him informed. Reports Marcus had signed off on without reading. He sat in his office after that call and did not move for a long time. The messages he sent her changed slowly. In the beginning, they were short and a little proud. "Are you okay? We should talk." Then they got longer. Late-night messages, sent at 2 in the morning, that he probably would have deleted in daylight. "I don't know how to do this without you. I don't think I understood what you were to me until now." Nadia read every one of them. She sat cross-legged on her sofa with a mug of tea and read them carefully, the way you read something important that you want to understand fully before you respond. And then she put her phone down and did not respond. Because she had learned, in the quiet of her new life, the difference between being moved and being pulled backward. She could feel both things at the same time and still choose only one. What she noticed in those weeks, more than anything else, was how much space she had. Space in her schedule, space in her thoughts. She had enrolled in a short evening course on urban design, something she had wanted to do for 4 years but had never found time for. She was sleeping through the night. She was cooking food she actually wanted to eat. She was laughing more easily, with her sister on the phone, with the woman who ran the cafe downstairs, with herself when she made small mistakes. She had not realized how much of her energy had been spent holding someone else's life together until she stopped doing it and felt the energy return. She was not without sadness. She loved Marcus in the complicated way you love someone who was real to you for a long time. She missed him in small, ordinary moments. When something funny happened that she would have told him. When she walked past the restaurant where they had their first real dinner. The missing was true, and she did not pretend otherwise. But missing something is not the same as needing to return to it. She had learned that now. Marcus called his mother in January. He told her everything, not the polished version, not the version where he was mostly blameless, but the real one. His mother listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, simply and without drama, "You had someone who loved you the way people pray to be loved, and you mistook her consistency for convenience." He did not argue. He could not. He knew she was right in the way you know something you have been avoiding for a long time. Suddenly, entirely, without escape. He began seeing a therapist, not as a strategy to win Nadia back, but because a man who cannot see the people who love him is a man who cannot see clearly at all, and he had been living half-blind for longer than he wanted to admit. He sat in a small office on Wednesday afternoons and talked, slowly and honestly, about the ways he had learned to receive without giving, to perform without reflecting, to need without acknowledging. He sent an email to Robert, the man from the dinner, and corrected the record. He told him, specifically and on paper, that the firm had not been built alone, that a great deal of what he was credited for had been shaped, supported, and in some cases entirely constructed by someone whose name people in his circle had never heard, and that he was sorry it had taken him this long to say so. And then he wrote Nadia a letter, not a plea, not an apology designed to bring her back, an and accounting. He went through his memory carefully and wrote down, one by one, every specific thing she had done that he had never properly acknowledged. The late nights, the difficult conversations she had handled on his behalf, the moments of grace she had extended when he had not deserved them, the way she had believed in him before he had fully believed in himself. He named it all. He took 4 drafts and 11 days. He left the letter at the front desk of her building on a Thursday morning and walked away without waiting for anything. Nadia read the letter twice, the first time quickly, because her hands were shaking slightly, the second time slowly, at her kitchen table, with tea she forgot to drink. She cried, not from grief, and not because she had changed her mind, but because there is a particular kind of relief that comes from being truly seen, even when the seeing arrives too late. She thought about it for a week. She walked through her days, attended her evening class, called her sister, tended to her plants, and turned the letter over in her mind, the way you turn a stone over in your hand, looking at it from different angles in different light. At the end of the week, she sat down and wrote back. 1 page, handwritten, calm. She told him that she believed the letter was true, that she believed something real had changed in him, that she was glad. She wished him well, not as a polite phrase but as an honest one, because she genuinely hoped he would continue becoming the kind of man he was beginning to be. And she told him she was not coming back, not out of punishment, and not out of hardness, but because she had found something in her own life that she was not willing to give up. She sealed the envelope, walked it to the postbox on the corner herself, and let it go. In the months that followed, Marcus rebuilt, quieter now, and more honest. He became more attentive in every relationship he had, not dramatically but in small, consistent ways. He began thanking people specifically, not generally. He began asking questions and waiting for the full answer. He stopped performing and started paying attention. By most accounts, he became a better person. Not a perfect one, but a man who had learned, at real cost, what it means to truly see another human being. Nadia finished her design course and applied for a full program in architecture, something she had deferred twice, each time for reasons that had to do with his life and not her own. She was accepted in the spring. She went to Portugal in April, alone, and sat at a small cafe table in Lisbon for 2 hours one afternoon, doing nothing except watching the light change slowly on the surface of old stone buildings. She drank her coffee. She wrote a little in her notebook. She felt, completely and without drama, like herself. She did not look back. Not because the past was not real, and not because it had not mattered, but because she had understood something that changed everything. Looking forward was not a betrayal of what had been. It was simply the direction that life moved, and she had decided, finally and fully, to move with it. Some people only understand the weight of what they had when they are forced to carry themselves without it. And some people, by then, have already learned they were never meant to be carried, only freed.